Welcome to our podcast, where we talk about the interesting, frustrating, and inspiring experiences we have as people with strongly held religious views working in corporate IT. We're not here to preach or teach you our religion. We're here to explore ways we make our career as IT professionals mesh, or at least not conflict, with our religious life. This is Technically Religious.
The phrase release to production conjures a very specific set of thoughts and even emotions for folks who live, breathe, and work with technology. Some of those thoughts and feelings are positive, while others are fraught with conflict. At the same time, those of us who are active in our religious community experience a different kind of release to production, releasing our children to the production environment of our faith, whether that is teaching abroad, missionary work, or adult religious education that takes our young adult across the globe. And, like our IT-based production release experiences, we watch our kids transition into chaotic systems where parental observability is minimal, even as the probability of encountering unknown error types grows. In this episode, we're going to look at what our IT discipline can teach us about how to make this phase of parental production cycle easier. I'm Josh Bigley, and the other voice you're going to hear on this episode is Leon Adato.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Leon. So as we always start our podcasts, let's do a little shameless self-promotion, if you don't mind.
I never mind shameless anything and self-promotion either. So I'm Leon Adato, as you said. I'm a head geek at SolarWinds. You can find me on the Twitters at Leon Adato. I also blog and pontificate on my website, www.adatosystems.com. And my particular religious worldview is Orthodox Jewish.
Fantastic. And for those who are new to our podcast, I'm Josh Bigley. I'm a senior engineer of enterprise monitoring. You can find me on the Twitters at jbigley. You can find my Faith Transitions community at www.faithtransitions.ca, where you will be redirected to our Facebook group. I am currently a post-Mormon transitioning into being an ex-Mormon. That's where we start. So, Leon, we've both had some challenges that I think have precipitated where we're at with this particular episode.
Yes.
And as we were having the discussion, I was thinking, I do love poetry. It's a wonderful thing. I found a poem by Robert Burns. It's from 1786, entitled "To a Mouse," and I'd love to have someone else read a portion of that because to get the Robert Burns from 1786 just right is important. So let's listen to that now before we begin.
But Mousey, thou art know thy lane and proven foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after gley, and leave us naught but grief and pain for promised joy.
All right, so I love that particular part of the poem. Robert Burns wrote this poem after plowing a field, and as he was going along, he noticed that he tore up the den of a mouse, and that caused him to reflect on it and write this poem. And for us, we have these plans that we lay out. We spend so much time invested in them, and then the chaos of the world grabs a hold of them and tears them apart.
Right. There's a few things I like about this. First of all, the poetry is heart-stopping. It's just amazing. And but I also like the fact that Robert Burns was plowing his field. He was doing a very normal sort of work-based activity, and yet he was also bringing his other, I'll use the word higher. I don't mean it in any sort of, value statement way, but he was using a more thoughtful part of himself to it. How many people are mowing lawn or, just walking through, a cut through, and they knock over a nest of some kind or whatever, and it's like, yeah, whatever, and move on. But here, this really obviously caused him some real introspection, and I think that is a wonderful analog to what we do as people with a religious, moral, or ethical point of view as we go through our IT lives, is that we don't divorce one from the other, and that sometimes moments within our regular workday lives cause us this reflection. I think it's important to clarify that when we talk about releasing to production, tongue in cheek, because we're talking about our kids, this isn't just, kids going off to college or getting a job or growing up, although it is those things. But it's particular to folks a who live in a faith-based lifestyle. There's some very specific things that I think our kids do that kids from a more secular background don't. For example, my kids went to either yeshiva or seminary after high school, or are going to go or in the process of going, and you'll hear more about that later. That's 1 or 2 or 3 years of purely religious education, not indoctrination. It's, real deep dive into the philosophy and theology, asking a lot of questions, challenging the thinking that they'd grown up with, learning the rest of the story kind of stuff. And there's also, depending on your faith, there's mission work. There's student exchange programs. There's teaching abroad. There's, gap year programs, all of which send our kids away, but not in the way that at least I think of a secular experience, what my secular experience was, which was you graduated from high school, you went to college, or maybe a trade school or whatever it is, and you got a job and you had your life. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about really releasing to a different kind of production system.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I find that a lot of people are starting to embrace this maybe alternative. Is that the right word for it?
Yeah, another option that I think wasn't considered by our parents when we were growing up, if you happen to be of a certain age.
Yeah, when my daughter graduated from high school last year, she was not the only person in her graduating class who was taking a gap year and who was doing something during that gap year. Going to work during a gap year, you hear about that a lot. But taking that gap year and doing what my daughter did, which was go to Haiti um, during the period of civil unrest that was going on, that was interesting. My son, the,
It might have been interesting for her, but I'm sure it was interesting in a whole different way for you and your wife.
it was. We should talk about that in the future. It was a very, yes, interesting is a good word for it. And my son is on a mission right now. He comes home in a couple of weeks, which we're super excited about. But a bunch of kids took a year off. One went to France, one went to Brazil as part of the Rotary Exchange program. So I I'm courageous. I'm excited for this future generation. In my graduating class, which wasn't nearly as large as my daughter's, I think I had 45 or 50 kids in my graduating class,
Mm-hmm.
but I was the only one who was going off to do something other than go to college or university or go to work. So it is a very unique thing that we have because of our faith. There's a problem here though, and I do want to talk about this. So having grown up Mormon. In fact, we just had some friends, family members of friends, I guess is the right way to put it, who stopped by unexpectedly, and they said, "Oh, by the way, we know your son Noah. We're from Utah. Here's how we know Noah. We met him while he was there." And so we got talking about their family, and they said to us, "Well, our son is 19 and has just proposed to his girlfriend. They're going to get married." Well, when you're a Mormon, you know that at 18 you become eligible to go on a mission. And so we said, "Oh, he didn't serve a mission." Now this couple doesn't know that we're no longer practicing Mormons. And you could see that just that flicker of disappointment in their eyes because there's that, yeah, we're from Utah and we know that our kids are supposed to go. So Leon, let's talk about what happens when we spend our entire lives trying to launch our children with their support
Right.
into a specific path and the T minus plan fails.
Right, and I like your phrasing. That it's a launch plan and a T minus, and remember that the astronauts in the capsule are not unwilling participants in this. They're just as engaged in trajectory and speed and velocity. They may not be the final arbiter of some of those things, but they are absolutely involved in those plans. And our kids, while they may not be the final arbiter of how they get where they're going or how quickly they get where they're going or whatever, they're active participants in helping plot the course. So I just like the phrasing. I think that's really good. And yeah, let's talk about when things don't go. So I think that if things don't go as planned, the first question, at least that I'm thinking, is did was this a failure on my part to plan at all, correctly, appropriately? What did I miss? I think that's, as a parent, maybe sometimes your first go to. What did I do wrong? You know?
I think that makes you a good parent. I
Oh, good.
mean,
Then I'm really good. I'm
you're old.
really, really good. you
I
know?
have no doubt.
Yeah, but if that is the one criteria, the self doubt, then absolutely, I have piles and piles of good parenting under my belt.
Well, and I think that's important though when we look at when we look at our children and we try to ask ourselves, why didn't things go to plan? We immediately look at ourselves, mostly because we can we can change ourselves. We can't change our children. We can sit them down and we can lecture them for hours on end,
Uh huh.
but about 15 minutes in, they're just going to stop listening. You know, I
If you get that much,
it,
that's
well,
that's pretty
yeah,
generous.
I was hoping for a good day.
Yeah.
I love the phrase analysis paralysis. It's something that I hear an awful lot at work,
Mm-hmm.
especially as we're using all the buzzword bingo key
Sure.
phrases, right? Agile and DevOps, and I heard a new one the other day, DevSecOps, and I'm like,
Ooh.
now we're just making up words. It's great,
If you're playing along at home,
right?
and you
Right,
haven't
bingo.
downloaded you can download the bingo card from technicallyreligious.com.
But I think that we can get to that point where we sort of look at our lives and the lives of our children. We expect them to do some very rigid things, and when they don't, things start to fall apart. We doubt ourselves, we doubt our children. To me, that feels disingenuous to the art of raising children.
Uh
I
huh.
mean, going back to to the Bible, right? Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve have these two kids. Cain and Abel, great kids, grew up well together, and then one day Cain kills Abel. I mean, did Adam and Eve, did they see that coming? They're like, what do we do wrong?
Right.
Uh, Geez, maybe we shouldn't have left the garden. You know,
Maybe yeah, that was unplanned. That was its own production, early release to production
yeah.
issue. There's and
That's what happens when alpha goes to prod, although it worked out really well. So
yeah, well, it can, but it also cannot. And there's even a question there. Just if we're going to invoke Cain and Abel, that Cain may not have understood. Look, Abel was the first person to die at all. He may not have understood that killing was a thing. And in the original Hebrew, the precursor to that moment is they were out in the fields, and Cain said to Abel, and Cain rose up and slew Abel. There's there's a missing. There's no text there. Now, as a person with two brothers, I can tell you with absolute certainty that I know I have a good. I could make some good guesses about what Cain said to Abel that would cause Cain to lash out. It caused that conflict to occur. However, we don't have textual evidence of it. But the point is that again, that probably wasn't Adam and Chava's, to use the Hebrew names, wasn't their plan for uh, what their kids were going to grow up to be or to do. Um,
what about the attributes of our children, though?
yeah.
I mean, oftentimes we look at our kids and we want to see the very best in them, but if our kids don't follow our plan, and I will admit, I am one of those kids that did not follow my parents' plan. In
Uh-huh.
fact, after I got home from Las Vegas, I explicitly did things to, I wouldn't say to make my parents upset, but when my parents said, don't do, I went ahead and did it. So when they said, hey, you shouldn't get married at 21, I was like, no, I'm getting married at 21. Hey, you shouldn't go, you should not go to school to do this. Oh, yeah, no, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to work full time. I mean, we're going to tell this story a little later, but does that mean that what does that mean about our kids? What does that mean about me? I'm going to lay it down on the couch now and you can tell me.
Right. So I think there's two aspects of that. First of all, I think as parents we also put way too much stock in this moment. This is the formative moment. If I don't get this right as a parent, it's all downhill from there. Leon, she's going into kindergarten. I know, but it's everything hinges on her getting into the right kindergarten, on her learning her ABCs. She was slow to walk, we have to make up for that. I think she's going to do playtime just fine. I think that sometimes we forget that, as much as we have recovered from, setbacks and failures, both big and small in our lives, our kids are going to also. And and the hard part is because we're sort of passive observers of it. There's a quote, Elizabeth Stone said it, making the decision to have a child, it is momentous. It is to decide forever to have your heart go walking around outside your body. And I think that sums up not just the experience of parenting for some folks, but also the level of pressure that I think that we feel, we put upon ourselves, that, again, that kindergarten moment has to be perfect because it's my heart there that you're dealing with. But the fact is that our kids are far more resilient than an internal organ. Usually, mostly. At
Mostly.
least so that's the first piece. I think the second piece is they are often more capable than we recognize, because when we see them, we see the totality of our experience with them from their first moments until this moment. And we experience all of those at the same time. So it's hard to remember that the person standing before you now is a relatively capable near adult, depending on how old they are, who is tougher than most of the times we give them credit for being, simply because we're also seeing them in diapers as we are watching them drive away in the car. So I think those two things are always at work in the head of in the head of a parent as they're, again, quote unquote, launching their child. I think there's another question though that comes up, at least for me, when things don't go according to plan, which is, I begin to wonder, after I've doubted myself, I begin to doubt my kid. Does it mean that they weren't committed? That they gave up too easily? Nobody wants a snowflake millennial for a child. Even if our children are millennial, we certainly don't want them to be unresilient. Or worse, we worry that maybe they're not taking it seriously, or even worse than that, that they're being utterly dismissive and disrespectful to our effort, not to mention our money. Like, whatever, they're sending me halfway across the world, but I can always come back. It's no big deal. They can cover it. Like,
Right.
that's
They got the platinum card, right?
right, right. It's just money. So, and you've spent months, trying to get doing the school paperwork and doing you've done all that stuff, and all of a sudden it doesn't go as you expected it to. And there's a lot of those feelings that sort of swirl around.
Yeah, I do want to address something about kindergarten. So my
Yeah.
daughter is starting university this week. In kindergarten, so in Ontario, there was junior kindergarten. She was 3.5 when she started because her birthday is later in the year.
Uh-huh.
She almost got kicked out of kindergarten because she would not talk and she refused to leave her little cubby where she hung her coat. She would sit in that and would not participate. And the school called us and said, hey, like maybe this isn't the right thing for her. Maybe she shouldn't be at school right now. This is the girl who hopped on a plane and flew to Haiti. This
Right.
is the girl who, when they said, we might have to send you home from Haiti because, there's civil unrest, there is literally rioting in the streets, was like, no, 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 I'm not going. And now she's headed off to university, and I would have never imagined it. So,
Right.
yes, my daughter was a snowflake in junior kindergarten. I get it, but
As
they
many
don't
of our
stay
kids are.
that way.
Yeah, and psychologists will call that telescoping. When you look at your 3-year-old who's eating paste and saying, "Oh, it's never gonna," and it's like, no, don't telescope. It's okay. The fact that they do it now doesn't mean that they're always doing it. Or, as another great parenting educator, Barbara Colaroso, said, I've never yet seen a high school senior walk down the graduation aisle with the shoes on the wrong feet, unless it was on purpose. You don't need to tell your kids to put the shoes on the right feet. They can figure that part out for themselves.
So I have another story.
Uh
When you
huh.
have lots of children, I have four. When you have lots of children, you have lots of stories. So I
Yes.
I have a son who suffers from how did we put it? Anything is possible when you don't know what you're doing, itis,
Uh huh. Yeah.
right?
I've worked for managers who suffer from it also, so it's a fairly common affliction.
Yeah, it's surprising. And to be fair, part of the beauty of youth is that you have no sweet clue what you can't do
Uh huh.
because you've never tried to do it.
Right.
But sometimes the things that you're trying to do are so wonderfully outlandish that you probably should not do them. I, in my own life, I wanted to be a lawyer. In
Uh
fact,
huh.
I still would love to be a lawyer. That whole going to school for 4 years and then having to go to law school for 2 or 3 years and then
Uh
having
huh.
to article for another 3 or 4 years just does not appeal to me. Go
Right.
figure. I kind of like making money and eating. I do like
Yeah,
to
I was
eat.
gonna say it's not the money part; it's the eating steady part that you've become
Yes,
kind of addicted to.
I have. Yeah, my waistline can attest to that. So all through high school, I was planning on being a lawyer. So I got to my senior year, and in Ontario at the time, you went to grade 13, which was a college, a university prep year. So as I'm entering my university prep year, my guidance counselor calls me in and says, "Hey, Josh, I'm looking at your transcript. You've got all the IT courses that we offer, and I what do you plan on doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be a lawyer." He said, "Oh, good. But if that doesn't work out, maybe I'll do IT." And he said, "Well, you really need to take math." I said, "No, no, no. I got all the math credits I need." I said, "Look, I know I'm going to be a lawyer. I would not be on this podcast if I was a lawyer."
True, true. As much as I enjoy our friendship, it wouldn't be technically religious anymore.
That's right. Yeah, it would just be awkward at that point. So I mean, I did it the hard way. I I didn't take math. I'm also, although I like math now, I did not like math in high school.
Right.
Well, I was a little hesitant to admit to liking math, but I do like math. And I really struggled. I mean, I wanted to be in IT as my backup plan. I didn't realize it was going to become my primary plan, but I really hated math and I hated the math learning experience.
Sure. So I want to frame some of this. Talking about your son, and his belief that he can do anything, even if he doesn't have sort of the basic background, I think is a good analog to you wanting to be in IT and not liking math. But I think that lots of folks who are in IT come at it from different directions. We know that. And math can be a challenge. And I think that there's sort of three ways that you can look at addressing it. Like, how do we address problems in IT? So there's sort of the easy way, which is to learn everything about that problem, right? I know that sounds like the hard way, but learning it up front is actually the easy way. Whether you're going to a vendor course or you're taking a training class or whatever it is, learning it, from start to finish in that order is the easy way. The hard way is actually learning as you go. and trying to do it School of Hard Knocks, and crashing it and rebuilding it and crashing it and rebuilding it, and not knowing what you don't know, and finding out 6 months later that you actually spec'd the systems incorrectly, and you have to go back to your director and ask for more money because you did it wrong the first time, or whatever it is. Like, all that is the hard way to go. I think there's a smart way to go, which is using tools to compensate for our gaps, and having the humility to know when to use those. So, for example, I like networking, and I am fairly good at networking, but like Cisco Nexus devices are a whole other class of networking that was not there when I initially got my CCNA in routing and switching. And trying to manage or monitor those devices is really challenging. But there are tools that can show me what's wrong with a Nexus installation so that I can get past those gaps in knowledge and skill and experience without the hard knocks, and without having to take 3 months of classes just to get up to speed on it.
Interesting. I am also afraid of the Nexus. It to me, I see one of those large spaghetti horrible monsters with a billion arms, and that's what I
Uh-huh.
think of when I think of a Nexus.
Right.
I
It's the
mean,
not invisible flying spaghetti
it,
monster.
it not invisible at all. It's actually kind of horrifying. So if we were to then like maybe modify this for
Uh-huh.
people like me,
Yep.
um, how would I handle this today? Like, what would the advice be to Josh from 1995-ish?
Right.
Oh, dang, I'm old. It's from 1995-ish, and explain, how I can be successful in IT, even though I didn't like math.
Okay, so I think that, again, easy way, hard way, smart way. The easy way is to go learn it. Now, part of the problem is that you didn't have the math credits in high school to get into a school immediately that had IT. Like, you couldn't have hacked the coursework. But in America, we have community colleges, sort of those smaller local colleges that are easier to get into. And a great way to get a leg up on stuff is just to take a community college set of community college courses, 1 or 2 years, and get into it and get those skills up, and then transition to a more challenging school where you're going to get the depth experience.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So in Canada, we call those a 2-and-2, right? So you do a 2 year of college, and in Canada, college is different than university. And then there's a matriculation agreement where you can get into usually third year, provided that you successfully completed the coursework in the first 2 years.
Right. So that would be the easy way. The hard way would be not to go to college at all, and not to get any training, but just to open your own IT business and learn as you go, break things as you go, and probably fail that business, and then you get into IT having had all that wonderful, painful experience. That would be the hard way, right?
Yeah, I did it kind of that way. I mean, I didn't start a business, but I got married at 21, had an instant family, my wife was pregnant a month later. I went to school, worked midnights, and then got a job working 60 hours a week while trying to get my MCSE. Right? Is that hard?
Okay, there's hard, and then there's heart failure.
Okay,
And
yeah.
that's, yeah.
Okay, heart failure it is then.
You have one order of myocardial infarction, please. There we go. Coming up. Yeah. So yeah, that would have been the really hard way. And some of us do that, and I think that there's again the smart way, that in between way, which is, as much as we say that IT requires math, it doesn't require all math. It requires a very specific set of math that if you take a little bit of time to understand the area of IT you want to get into, then you can focus on just learning the math you need for that area, right?
I'm a big fan of that model. I wish that my 18-year-old self could have a discussion with my 40 year old self, and I could say, look, you can do this. Now I get it. When I was 18, things like Khan Academy or Code Camp didn't exist, but Wow, kids today, if you know the thing that you want, the thing that gets you really excited about math, and it's not going and taking trigonometry, then learn the math that gets you geeked. For me, it's statistics. I really love stats.
Right. And I think that that's another thing that um, the difference between non young adult our non young adult kids is that, why do I have to do this algebra? Because it's ninth grade curriculum and you're going to do it. I don't have another answer. This is stupid. I'm never going to use it. Can't argue for or against that, but it's still in the curriculum. You're going to do it. Like, that is the parenting conversation. But with our young adults, we can say, look, if you love this thing, if you love doing this thing, whether it's IT or business or whatever, there's going to be math involved, but you just have to learn that. But if you love this thing, you're going to love the math that goes along with it. And if you don't love it, at least you're going to tolerate it. So being monitoring geeks, both you and I, math is also not my strong suit. It's not something that I naturally gravitate toward the way that some of the other voices we have on the show, like Doug Johnson, who really does love math. That's a different thing, that love of pure math. But I really enjoy the math that I get to do when I'm scripting, when I'm pulling statistics out of devices for monitoring, when I'm building new visualizations. That math really gets me going because I know what I'm doing with it, because it has an application. So that's what we can say to our young adult kids is, even if you think you don't like it from school, it was really bad, the fact is that you will like it because it's part of the thing that you're telling me that you like. We know you can't listen to our podcast all day, so out of respect for your time, we've broken this particular conversation up. Come back next week, and we'll continue our conversation.
Thanks for making time for us this week. To hear more of Technically Religious, visit our website, technicallyreligious.com, where you can find our other episodes, leave us ideas for future discussions, and connect to us on social media.
Test and dev? Ha ha, not me. I test and prod. What could possibly go wrong?
Narrator. Apparently, a lot. Nobody was surprised.